Last night I went to see the live show An Evening with Jameela Jamil, and unfortunately I had to walk out halfway through because I was so disappointed with some of the stuff that Jameela was saying. So I'm going to talk to you about what those issues were, but I stress this video is not a calling out. If anything, it is a calling in, which is a thing that I agree with Jameela that leftists need to do more and have an open discussion about the nuances of the issues that we all feel passionate about together, in this case gender equality. So the main thrust of a lot of what Jameela has been saying lately is that women need to extend more empathy to men, specifically in the space of feminism, in order for men not to be turned away and to become anti-feminists. Jameela is advocating for women to extend them more benefit of the doubt and more empathy. But I think what all women need to understand is that women extending empathy to men is not a new or subversive idea. It is in fact the status quo. It's not like a new or revolutionary idea for people to say that women need to be nicer to men in order to stop men from being angry and violent about women and feminism. And I don't think Jameela was saying that she's the first person to say this, but I will say that the many people who have said this before have also not succeeded in bringing men around to being nicer to women. It's not an approach that works, and it's not a line of thinking that has the effect it's intended to. I'm concerned that some people might take this message to mean that it is women's and girls' responsibility to stop men's and boys' radicalization into violent misogyny. It's frustrating to hear this because men and boys have enjoyed millennia of an excess of women's empathy already, and in return they have not been extending the same empathy to us. It is in fact men who need to be extending significantly more empathy towards women. They need to be trying to see us as full humans the way we have always done to them. They need to believe us like we have always believed them. They need to be curious about our experiences and our interiority the way women have always been taught to be about them, and they need to get their patriarchal boot off our head through a sense of empathy about what it must feel like to be us. And it's hard to hear a message that women need to give men more benefit of the doubt among an audience of women who are probably 10 to 15 years younger than me, who have already spent their young years giving all the men in their life the benefit of the doubt. And it is a benefit of the doubt that those men have often taken advantage of and put them in vulnerable positions, which those women will then blame themselves for getting themselves into. The other big problem I had with things Jameela said was the appeal to bioessentialism and the idea of innately gendered traits. If you have followed me for a while, you will know that I go on about this all the time, but it always bears repeating that there is no such thing as a gendered brain. I don't necessarily expect all women to already know this, which is why I have to say it over and over and over again. But the idea that women have innate traits like superior capacity for emotionality is simply a myth. And the latest neuroscience really disagrees with neuroscience from even 5 years ago about the brain and gender. So we really have to discard all these weird myths we've picked up over the last 25 years about how women are more emotional and men are more logical, and it's all just written there in their brains. And unfortunately, this misconception led Jameela to construct the idea that because of women's superior ability to understand emotions and be emotional, it is therefore our job to teach men to act with more emotionality and to have more sympathy and that sort of thing. And so I did see an inherent contradiction in this and something else she said later, which was when she called out the danger of the tradwife movement, which she is very right about, and the fact that it is a slide towards conservatism. However, the bioessentialist view of the body and gender is also that very same foundation of conservative gender role, far right, dangerous, fascist supremacy that we really have to be very wary of when we see it. And side note, bioessentialism regarding brain gender is also a dog whistle for transphobes and TERFs. And I know that Jameela herself is very pro-trans, so it's certainly something that I would want to draw attention to, is that believing in ideas like women are like this in their brains and men are like this in their brains is not progressive and is not going to help us in the feminist fight. The other thing that I was quite disappointed that Jameela kept saying was not all men. And as feminists or people interested in gender equality, it is irresponsible of us to say not all men unironically without then following it up by saying, but all men benefit from patriarchal misogyny and the ambient threat of violence by some men, which keeps women oppressed and in line. Jameela also did say a couple of confusing things that seemed a little bit out of the MRA playbook, so I'm not sure where she is going with this, but she drew attention to this idea that men have suffered a lot. They've gone to wars, they've done all the violent and dangerous jobs. This was a surprise to hear from someone who's interested in women's issues. It's important to understand that yes, men were called to these dangerous jobs and wars, but they were called to do it by men, and women were barred from doing these things. And for the most part, it's lower class men who were expected to do this, which is just a manifestation of the capitalist patriarchal project, which I also know Jameela is against. And honestly, it's a bit facile to talk about this idea that men have taken on all these dangerous jobs when in fact the entire patriarchal project is built on the backs of injured, exploited, dead, assaulted women, women's unpaid labour, unpaid domestic caring labour, as well as public labour. Women were also always in the workforce. There was also another subject that I thought needed a lot more nuance, which was about where women can get the energy for their activism from. So this event was hosted by April Helene Horton, also better known as the Bodzilla, and she asked Jameela, well, if we're going to be extending this empathy to men and changing the world, where are we going to get that energy from? And Jameela said one of the big, wasters of our energy and time is obviously the relentless obligation towards beauty labor, self-hate, and the beauty industry. And while I do think it's important to talk about how beauty labor is a waste of women's time, we are also, I think, obligated to talk about the other much more significant kinds of unpaid and unvalued labor that women are duty-bound to perform, and the performance of which holds up the entire patriarchal structure. So obviously some other things sapping women's time and labour are our domestic and caring labour loads, our economic disempowerment, medical misogyny, gender bias in the workplace, personal safety issues. So those are my big issues. I also do want to call out some of the things that I think Jameela is completely right about. The first one I touched on in the beginning of this video, which is that the left has a tendency to eat itself, and calling each other out for the merest infraction or incorrect thought in our philosophy is not going to help anyone. She pointed out that the right tends to welcome everyone in and have a big party, and really there is no sort of moral code that you have to hew to on the right, because as long as you are towing the party line, they will agree with you and the right will just get stronger and stronger and stronger. This is totally correct, and it's why I'm only interested in calling people in and having a nuanced discussion about what it is that they said, rather than painting them as some kind of villain for not getting it right. I've also greatly admired for a long time Jameela's work about beauty and the beauty industry, beauty labor, and the capitalist exploitation of that, the way that it is designed to distract and exploit you and stop you from doing the work of activism. She's also right that young boys don't understand the context of the men are trash messaging that women are increasingly feeling a bit emboldened to say as they go on their gender equality journey. But I definitely do not think that women and girls extending even more empathy and benefit of the doubt to men who have historically enjoyed rather a surfeit of it is the answer to this. In fact, I don't think anybody has come up with the right answer to this problem yet. And I follow a lot of incredibly accomplished, thought-penetrating feminists. Nobody has the answer to this yet, and we're just going to have to keep plugging away at it. Anyway, if you want to learn more about the lay of the land and the history between men and women and why these issues are so systemic, so power-based, so based in disenfranchisement and exploitation that can't just be solved by us all coming together and extending empathy, I'm going to put a reading list on screen. It will be like maybe 2 or 3 slides. Just pause to screenshot, I guess, and happy learning.